Hacking the interview process is the topic of today's conversation. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of the term hacking. It seems like you're almost like cheating or cutting corners. And that's actually not what we're doing here. So I'm not giving you ways to get ahead by cheating. However, I do think there are ways to simplify the crazy complex world that is interviewing into a few key things that will help you stand apart as you go through the process. So these are not tricks as much as they are really important things that being on the hiring manager side of the table, I have seen really be effective and help people stand out in the process. And so as we get started, I would love for you to either come off mute if you're comfortable doing that or drop into chat your definition of success for our time together. We have just under an hour at this point, and my hope would be that at the end of this time, you look back and think, holy cow, that was really valuable. Oftentimes, winning in the interview process and on the job isn't usually one big heroic thing that happens, right? It's victory by a thousand wins. And so, my hope today is to give you a few things that you can put in your tool belt and take with you. But I'm curious what questions and concerns you come to the table with. And if I can, along the way, I'd love to stop and make sure we touch on some of those. So, if you had to fill in the blank, Morgan, your talk will be helpful for me if you discuss this. You can unmute if you're comfortable or just drop it into chat. And I'd love to give us some time to just think about what success looks like for our time together. Managing imposter syndrome. Absolutely. That is super real. Very good. How to stand out at the beginning of an interview? Yes, we will definitely be talking about ways to stand out. The act of standing out is one of the most important things we can do. So that's great. We'll definitely talk about that. Steve, anybody else? Let's wait for one more. What do you think? What do you hope to learn? Is there a question that you have? What are hiring managers looking for? Yeah, great. All right, let's go ahead. Yeah, best questions after an interview. Love it. All right, let's jump in. So the first thing I'm actually going to touch on, and this is a little bit talking about imposter syndrome, um, but it's a key to the hiring process, which is finding your confidence. I put the word "your" there because what gives you confidence is going to be different than what gives me confidence. I think there are certain things that, whether it's experience or predispositions or just like topics that you're comfortable with, will look different for every person. And so I can't sit here and tell you, here's what you should memorize to go in because one, it's not going to be as natural. And also, I think you have things today about yourself that are more compelling than you realize. So part of confidence is just accepting them for what they are. There are a few things that I have here that I'm going to share that I found to be pretty common insecurities among code school students, bootcamp graduates, that I think you're wrong. I think you look at them with one perspective, where my hope would be that you actually see it from a different perspective. Before we dive in, I actually want to do an activity. If you would, and you can still look at the screen, that's fine, but point up toward the ceiling. So for those on camera, you're being very bold here, right? You're doing it on live. Now rotate your finger clockwise. You can look up if you need to, right? Look up, point and do clockwise. Right, that's the direction that the clock turns for those that are just catching up. Great. And now slowly start to bring it down. Keep spinning it, but bring it down by your kind of by your chest, now near your belly button. Now look down. What direction is your finger spinning? Try it again. Some of you stopped. So clockwise above your head, spin it down. What direction? When it gets down to just under your eye level, the direction shifts. Not because you move your hand, but why is it now going in the opposite direction? Can somebody type it in a chat or just unmute and shout it out? What's changed between here and here? Your perspective, that's exactly right. There are so many things today that you perceive as weakness, and I want to propose that they are strengths. So let's dive into them. Nothing's going to change between here and there except hopefully your perspective. The first is people who come to boot camps to learn programming abilities, whether you're on the design side, the development side, whatever, right? This style of very intensive, often shorter cycles of learning most people come in with some diverse background. They did something else before. And the story graduates or students often tell themselves is, I don't have much experience in tech, which is true. You're right. However, some of the most insightful ideas and the value provided to teams is not from people who are really good technologists. It's from people who have skills and experience from outside of an industry, and they can bring it into technology, right? So you are bringing something with you, which is what makes you different and unique. That can feel like a disadvantage when you look at years of experience on a job application. However, there's all kinds of indirect benefits of people with different lived experiences and backgrounds. And that is something that not only you should be proud of, but that helps differentiate you because the chances are other people don't have that. And it gives you a unique set of skills. Next up is actionable skills. Many people compare themselves and their experience to people who went to college for this or people who have a computer science degree. Well, I can tell you of the people I know who have a computer science degree who are like what we would call like the traditional industry people, um, didn't learn the skills they do in their job in school. Most of them still had to pick them up somewhere because college often focuses on theory more than execution. And a lot of the curriculum that gets approved in colleges is just old, right? Old, outdated. And I think we would all agree that the tech industry moves very fast, which means if you aren't rapidly evolving your curriculum, it's out of date. So I love code schools and boot camps because they're always reevaluating their curriculum and highlighting the skills that employers want today, not necessarily the philosophies and the things that, of course, can be really great depth to a programming background, but aren't really actionable. Right? So that's very valuable in an area where you would actually have an advantage there. Um, I see a comment there. Boot camp is greater than a 4-year degree. Um, you can learn plenty of really awesome things with a 4-year degree, but when I'm thinking about technical ability and somebody's how well somebody can transition in and get to work, right, and do billable work quickly, I do think boot camps have an advantage over a 4-year degree. Which brings me to my next point, which is learning quickly. Right, colleges, congratulations, you have 4 years to learn a topic. That means you can be pretty patient and you can take your time. A full load at college is somewhere between 12 and 15 hours a week, which is not even close to a full-time job. And so in a bootcamp type environment, you are forced to learn really quickly, which again, we covered earlier, which is the tech industry is evolving fast, which means if you're going to keep up, you need to be ready to learn. And so it gets you started at the pace that you're going to be expected to work at, which I think in many cases prepares you better for the workforce. Right? These are all things that I think are very real. It may not be obvious to every hiring manager, but you should absolutely put these justifications in your arsenal to respond to questions that they may have or to advocate for yourself because it is so real, right? If you gave me somebody who for the last 12 weeks has been working 50, 60 hours learning aggressively and put them head to head with somebody who had 12 hours a week for 4 years, right? There are certain things that there's a depth of knowledge that I'm sure the 4-year student could have accumulated, but there is a momentum behind the person who learned very quickly that is absolutely what people want within their company. There's a comment here that says, I've heard many hiring managers talk about how bootcamp graduates don't have basic fundamentals and theories required for jobs. Would you agree? Um, I think it would depend. What do you call basic fundamentals? Can you describe the ins and outs of how an algorithm works? I don't know. I think I have more questions than I have answers after that. Do you know what a loop is? And can you program one? Right? That's way more practical. In terms of theory, that's probably true. Like there's a bunch of stuff I don't even know about technology and who's the person who invented the first microchip. And I think that makes for really good trivia night. I will fail tech trivia night. But I have successfully worked and delivered work and grown companies in tech for 10 plus years without knowing all of those things. And so I can tell you, is there information that's missing? Yes. And can you be successful without it? And the answer is absolutely yes. Parenting is a great analogy here. Before I had my first child, I had never done it before. And I have managed to keep now both of my children alive and done it multiple times, and it's okay, right? So yes, you can likely find bits of information that you don't know. I always want to come back to, does it matter? In the grand scheme of things, does it matter that I don't know those things? In some places, maybe. If it's a machine learning job in the government, yeah, you're probably going to need to know who our last 5 presidents were or something. There's probably some value there. But there's a ton of actionable skills that, it's all about trade-offs. And so I would imagine that while other people were in 4-year degrees, you were racking up other types of skills and experience that potentially could make you more qualified. Next is dynamic curriculum. I mentioned this a little bit around actionable skills, but it's evolving quickly. Most instructors that I know who teach at code schools and boot camps, they're always evolving the curriculum, and they have the freedom and flexibility to do that. It takes something like an act of Congress to change the curriculum in a lot of colleges, which just means it's not happening as often. So I question, a 5 to 10-year-old curriculum around technology. I can't even imagine, because TikTok didn't even exist back then. All right, next is pre-vetted. There are certain behaviors and tendencies that I've found with bootcamp graduates that are unique. And you have taken, usually there's some background knowledge or experience. You were doing something before you started doing this, right? Very few people who come into a boot camp are truly 16 to 18 years old, right? The demographic skews much older, and it's because life was on a certain trajectory, and then for some reason, you wanted a change. Most people, believe it or not, even within technology, don't like their job. Something like 80-something% of people don't like their job, but most people just talk about it. They talk with family and friends. You have done something about it. The fact that you have taken action out of whatever you were doing into in hopes of something new says something about you that is inherently different than everybody else. There are many things like that with simply based on people being at boot camp. Like the fact that you are here in the room says there's something different about you. And there's a pre-vetting, right, that happens there that I think is really, really important. I personally am not very interested in people who just talk about being unhappy. You can be unhappy. That's absolutely fine. That's normal. But people who just talk about it are very different than people who talk about it and are actively working to change something. And I think that's what you're doing. And so give yourself some credit for that. All right, I've got 10 lessons here that I hope you can take away from this. What I will say is my goal is to share experiences, not a prescription. So I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm saying, here's what I've seen work. And in some cases, I may say, you should do this, but it's because I've seen it work really, really well, not because I'm just, dreaming about what could be and then hoping you go try it. So you're not my guinea pigs. I've seen it. That's where these lessons come from. So the first lesson is find out how you can make an impression. Step back for a second. This is not limited to your tech skills. I'm going to give you an example. This is me working at Medieval Times. It's probably 10 years ago now, 10 or more. Yes, I had a cape and tights and a sword. My hair, that was real. And yes, the horse was real. This is how I worked my way through college. It was a blast. I joke that 2 types of people love Medieval Times, people under 21 and people over 21. In the States, 21 is the drinking age. So maybe that joke will make sense later for you. Now, why do I tell you this? Well, because people find this interesting. I have found over the course of my career, this is one fact about me that people have all kinds of questions. You have horse people who want to know about the horses. You have people who LARP and do role-playing stuff and who go to Comic-Con and they have questions. You have people who've been to Medieval Times as a child and they got the rose from their favorite knight. Questions abound. One of the easiest ways to build human connection is to share this story about myself. The horse's name was Apollo. Right? So that's a great example, right? What are we doing? We're talking, we're laughing, and I do, my lords, my ladies, welcome, right? I can put on a little show. And at the end of the day, it helps build a connection. And in many people's minds, I'm the Medieval Times guy. Well, why does that matter? Well, because you remember something. One, you remember a fact and you connect it to me. And usually in this case, why I pick the story is because it's generally positive, right? It's fun, it's playful, and it shows some personality here. And all of these things are a way to make an impression. I have a friend that he didn't tell me this until we'd known each other for, I think it was like 5 or 6 years. And he said, as soon as I found out you worked at Medieval Times, I knew we had to be friends. And I was like, I thought like we just kind of hit it off. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. But like, there was just something about you that just said, you're my people and I got to get to know you, which, so I'm like, 6 years down the road, a little creeped out. And I was like, yeah, but there was something about that, right? That resonates. So all of us have these little things that might be weird to you, or you may not talk about it, or you're so close to it that you don't notice, but are great bids of connection when it comes to the interview process. It can help you make an impression, because the important part is make an impression, not that it has to be within tech. I have another example. So many of you might like to run. I ran an ultra marathon last year. It was a 50-mile race. It was in Chicago. And so if people bridge the gap of, hey, like, what do you like to do for fun? Well, no, I'm going straight for the throat, right? We're talking about something that I know is going to be super stinking unique. Not a lot of people have that story. And then, some people want to talk about Chicago. I'm like, I just said I ran 50 miles and you want to talk about the Windy City? Like, what the heck? That's fine, right? We can lean into that. And you like to travel? Oh, I like to travel. Running's just an excuse to travel. Now we're not talking about running. We're talking about travel. That's fine, right? Make an impression. Ultra shoes for the win. Yes, Steve. They're great. So again, you have these things. You just don't realize them. Also, I think you can do a little extra. So I've run for years, and doing a little extra, right? Doing a race, doing something special like this is a way of taking something that's kind of average and turning it up a notch to where now I know that almost forever, I'll have a slightly more interesting story around this topic. I also met somebody. I ran a marathon before this, and a gentleman running beside me was sharing about how he got his first job as a lawyer. And he applied for a position he was so underqualified for. But he had put on his LinkedIn that he had run a 200-mile race. It was like a multi-day thing. And he like put it on his LinkedIn. He was like finisher of a 200-mile foot race. And he got called into this guy's office, and the guy told him, he's like, look, I'm going to be honest. You're the least qualified candidate we have for this position. But I was looking through your resume and I saw that you ran a 200-mile race. And I thought, I have to talk to somebody who's done this. And he said, the guy gave them 15 minutes for their interview. He said an hour and a half later, they were walking out the door to grab lunch, and he got the job. It all started talking about this one thing. And then he realized, so much of the legal industry is about perseverance, right? Working hard. And he's like, would I bet on you, who knows what it's like to endure a 200-mile race, to like go the distance for our clients? And like, whatever, right? People tell themselves these stories. Whether or not it's true, I don't really know in terms of, is that the reason he got the gig? But he built that connection, got an opportunity with something that crazy. So again, you have it in you. Look outside technology. I'll say it again. I think there is a line between creepy and compelling. So I'll just lob that out there. Keep in mind, there are some things that are very unique about you that might not have the desired effect. So just keep that in mind. But by and large, I think you've got a lot of wiggle room. Lesson number 2 is invest in your appearance. Something happened during COVID and 2020. People just stopped investing in bathing. I don't know, under-investing in appearance because it felt like nothing really mattered anymore. We're all through the screen. I still think there are ways, even if you're doing Zoom phone calls, to invest in your appearance. Here are a couple of them. The first is a simple background. You'll notice behind me, there's not a bunch of stuff going on. People aren't walking past me. That would be so distracting. So in the interview process, have a simple background. It is bothering me a little bit because my lighting is kind of weird at the moment. But lighting is also really important. An easy hack is to put a light on the other side of your screen so that your face is well lit. Something that we lost when we spent as much time in person is the ability to see people's facial expressions, right? And so if it's really well lit, you can see more of people's emotion and their connection, and that helps us subconsciously connect with people. The next is camera height. Very simple solution here is put your computer up during the interview on a couple of books to get it at eye level. Right? Next is clothes, right? Pick clothes that look, clean, simple, unruffled. Even you'll notice in my picture here, I moved from a black shirt to a hoodie, but the hoodie, you kind of can't tell. It has like a visual effect that looks just a little bit more put together than the t-shirt. Right? And then last is posture. get yourself in a position where, you're sitting back, your shoulders are back, your head is straight. All of these things add up on a subconscious level to employers. And if nothing else, it's just less distracting. In many cases, they can't tell you why it's different, right? But there's something about interviewing candidates when it feels like, hey, you're fully present, I have your attention, and you put some energy into what I'm seeing, that sends a message of preparation to employers. And jobs are super important. They tend to be 100% of how people fund their entire lives. And so people who put some preparation toward that have a way of standing out. John, I just started a comment, you're a professional sleeper. Um, all righty. I'm very good at sleeping. I try to get only enough. So I'm an amateur sleeper, maybe. All right. Lesson number 3, follow up. We will actually disqualify candidates simply because they do not follow up. If we have an interview and I don't hear back from you, you probably won't hear back from me. We put it on the candidate to follow up. Why is that? Because jobs are important. They fund most of people's life, in which case that's the most important thing you could get is a paying job. And if it's not important enough to express gratitude or to follow up, then how will you treat the rest of work when it's most of it is less important than that, right? Follow up is a very important part of business to keep conversations moving, to show that it matters to you, that it's a priority. So follow-ups are key. Here's a very simple one. It doesn't have to be long and elaborate. I personally, especially if I'm hiring a candidate, we may have to go through hundreds of applicants, which means, yes, I expect a follow-up, and I'm probably not going to spend dozens of hours or dozens of minutes even reading all of these follow-ups. So if you can keep it short, maybe a little punchy, a little playful, the odds of somebody reading it goes up significantly. Just because you wrote it, don't assume they're going to read it. So the easiest thing to do is make it short and concise and to the point. You can add a little bit of playfulness in the interview process. This is like a kind of a little extra hack here. If somebody asks a question that you don't know the answer to, hey, I'm not sure. I'll get back to you on that. If those words come out of your mouth, you better get back to them, because most hiring managers are looking for that. The follow-up is a great piece of accountability to go back to and say, okay, did I commit to following up about anything? Put it in here. That's great.
Oh, and then Avalon asked, what is the best way to follow up, call, email, etc.? And when does following up become too overbearing, i.e. calling every few days to check on the application process, etc.?
Yeah, great question. The email is great. Email is at least the expectation. We have had candidates who've also sent over like packages or snacks afterwards. So we've gotten Tiff's Treats, which is like a company that delivers hot cookies to your door. About an hour after a candidate left, we had warm cookies delivered to our door. We're like, who's this from? Oh my goodness, this is from this person. Oh, that was that person. Oh my goodness. Oh, this is great. I love them. And then it's not necessarily serious, but there's plenty of joking around, like, oh, put them on the top of the pile. What's happening? They're talking about you, right? What are they not doing? Talking about other people. And so there's a lot of advantages to doing these little things. So email follow up, minimum. These little extra sprinkles of delight, I think, is great. One thing, we had a candidate who left handwritten notes. Is it necessary? I don't know, but it's different and it stood out, right? I'm telling you these stories because real people did them, and it made an impression that years later I'm remembering them. And so all of that absolutely matters in the process. One of my thoughts around follow-ups is every person, every time. And so if you interview 3 people in a day, don't send one email to 3 people, because what that means is none of them are going to respond, because you've just essentially outsourced that to everybody. Individual emails to each of them. And now if I'm on a one-on-one thread with somebody, the expectation of me to reply goes up considerably. And then you've initiated 3 independent conversations with people at a single company. And what are the odds that you're going to be able to build better human connections, right? You've just tripled your odds, and then just by number of people. And then now you can have more one-on-one conversations where maybe you spoke with somebody about their sourdough habit, that they love to make sourdough bread, and somebody else is the runner person, and somebody else who you don't really like dogs, but you know they have a dog and you used to have a dog, and so you talk to them about like whatever it may be, right? You divide and conquer, increasing your odds there. The last note around being overbearing, there is a difference between dating and interviewing. If you follow up too much in dating, sure, there's all kinds of concern that you might be perceived as desperate. I don't know what that special number is. I've been married for a long time. What I will say in the interview process is let the other person decide. So follow up until there's the initial follow up of thank you. Thank you for taking the time and the energy. That's the first message. And then I think it's absolutely acceptable. And I would probably put the cadence somewhere to every 3 to 5 days. Hey, Sally, we spoke last week. I'm just checking in on the status of my application. Since we last spoke, here are some other things I've been working on that are now new additions to my resume. Bam. Right. And then I would keep following up. Why not? If we were in real life and I was talking to you and you ignored me, that would be rude. But in the internet world, if I send you messages and you don't respond, maybe you're just busy. Right? There's an expression that I love, which is no reply means absolutely nothing. Keep doing it. And if you're being overwhelming at a certain point, right? If I feel like, okay, but Morgan, you don't understand. I'm sending like 5 and 6 messages. I feel annoying. I feel like I'm pestering them. Then I would say that in the email. I would tell them, hey, Sally, it's been a while. Haven't heard back from you, but following up is kind of my thing. I realize this might be a lot at this point. However, this matters a lot to me, and I don't want to miss this opportunity. Okay? That's one way of saying it. Next email might be, hey, Sally, me again. I'm assuming you're on a 1-month sabbatical in Spain. I hope the weather there is beautiful. Right? Like, is she in Spain? I don't know, right? You're being playful, having a banter, and ultimately trying to just say, I'm logging a follow-up because this matters. I have had one person who actually said like, yeah, leave me alone, right? Most other people won't respond, and this is what you want. People will say, oh my gosh, I've been swamped. Oh my goodness, I had a death in the family. Oh my, I lost access to my email and no. Thank you so much. And they're saying thank you for bothering them a lot, right? That's way more common than people saying you're a total nag. In the interview process, we've had candidates who they send a follow-up, they reach out on LinkedIn and connect with a bunch of people. They're messaging all these different angles. And in our minds, like usually how that goes about is, wow, this person, they want it. Right? So it's not oh my gosh, they're desperate. It's, wow, this matters to them. Lesson number 4, come prepared. There's so many things you can do to just prepare for the experience. I've been in interviews with software engineers and they didn't know who I was. I'm not famous, okay? I'm just the chief technology officer of the company that they were applying to. I'm one of the longest tenured employees. Like, you would almost, like, if you did any looking of humans at the company, I would appear, and they didn't know who I was. Immediately, my interest in the conversation started to wane because I know a lot about them, and they didn't spend any effort getting to know about anybody in our company who they were going to meet with, right? Like, I've been talking with them via email. Still, it's pretty clear. Whereas there are plenty of people on the other side that have thoughts and have questions. Here are a couple ways that you could come prepared. And I would suggest that this is your baseline. Any company that they're going to give you the time of day for an interview, you need to learn about the company details. Are they a startup? How much money have they raised? Who are some of their top investors? What's their product? When did they pivot? When did they found? Just learn things. Get curious about this company. Software engineers and people in tech who do well are curious people because, again, you're always learning. And so you're getting curious about what to learn. This is just a new opportunity to exercise that muscle. Second is team member names and roles, LinkedIn, team pages, all of that. The information is usually out there. If the company is, let's say, under 200 people, you can find this stuff. Come prepared. I had somebody, I wasn't even interviewing this candidate. They came to our door, and as soon as I have to the door, they said, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm here to meet with Matthew. Are you Morgan? And I'm like, oh crap, did I forget? Have we met before? Right now I'm kind of on my heels. They're like, oh no, I was just doing some research on the company and I noticed, you were one of the first team members. Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, I've been here. I love the place, right? We've now started to build a rapport. It's clear they've put in some energy. They were flexing a little bit, no doubt, but it stood out, right? It's memorable. Being able to call people by name is a really special way of building that connection. And then finally, have questions. This is back to being curious. I have questions about the company. You can have questions about the people. I think it's one of the things that not enough people ask me that I think is a great question to ask is, do you mind if I speak? Who is the last person to be hired here? Do you mind if I chat with them for a few minutes? Okay, well, why does that matter, Morgan? Well, the last person to be hired there has the closest to the experience that you're about to have if you work there. And you could ask them, like, hey, how is this different from when you started? Like, your expectation when you started to now, right? Also, if you find that, oh, the last person to start here started 5 years ago, does that mean they have high turnover? Like, right? There's all kinds of implications around who that person might be and what they know.
Oh, and then actually, Morgan, I have a question for you. What is one of your favorite memories from working at New Story Charity?
Yeah, you're saying ask the hiring manager, or ask them
Oh,
that, or
I'm
are you
asking
asking
you,
me?
but
Oh,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
also.
Yeah, so actually, one of my favorite memories. I was working on some software that was connecting. We connect every donor dollar to the actual family. So we have a ledger that reconciles all of that. Most nonprofits don't, believe it or not. So anyway, like built the software, was working on it, and I'm sitting at my kitchen table watching my daughter eat breakfast while I'm working on this. And the algorithm, the system's running and connecting all these dots, and I'm like periodically clicking on some of the family profiles that popped up. And one of them was a father with two daughters who had a motorcycle and ran like a taxi company on a motorcycle thing. And I just remember, I love motorcycles. I sold my motorcycle to buy my wife's wedding ring. And so I just like felt connected to this father who was starting a business, had two daughters. And I remember like looking at my daughter and feeling just a sense of gratitude that the 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 lifestyle and the safety that we were able to provide for other people's families is something that my children have always known. And just like there's so much privilege in that and so much opportunity that my kids will hopefully have because they have that safety and security. And so kind of feeling that juxtaposition in the moment of like, am I safe, clean, dry home? Being able to help assign money to new families who will be able to get that. And that's just maybe the most memorable of kind of feeling the impact of the work.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. That's one of my favorite questions to have students ask just because it's different than why did you start working here? Because you're giving me a specific memory. And the thing is with these memories, like this one stood out to you, but like specifically that you drew on it like that. Right. That tells me about, your passion and, the impact that you have on these families, right? And that you really do relate with them, even if they are like a name on this ledger, right? So it just really also tells me about the culture for sure. Thank you so
Yeah, I love
much.
it. No, that's a very good question. And I hope for many of you who are listening, you could hear other questions that if I was the hiring manager, that you could follow up with, right? Maybe now you're asking me about motorcycles. Maybe you're asking about having kids. Maybe you're asking me about starting a business, right? I just kind of cracked open a bunch of doors off of that one question. And so another thing, and I don't think I mentioned this here, which in hindsight, I may go add this, take notes. I am always writing and taking notes when people are talking because as soon as I can write it, so let's say a thought comes to me, I want to write it down and then I can stop dwelling on trying to remember the thought and I can be fully present in the moment. And then some of these other angles to talk about, all you're doing is making your future life easier of being able to connect dots to remember things. Plus, in taking notes, you're signaling to the other person that what you're saying matters to me. And that goes a long way. All right, lesson number 5, play the numbers game. People ask, how many jobs should I apply to? And I have a go wide and go deep strategy. And the way that I would think about this is if you don't need a spreadsheet to manage the number of jobs you apply to, you aren't doing enough. How many is the right number? I don't know. But if it doesn't take a spreadsheet to keep it all straight, you're not doing enough. And then pick about 20% of those jobs and go very deep into who the company is. How can I get access? Do I know anybody who's there? Right? Put in the extra effort on 20%, but make sure you're putting a lot of effort into just covering your bases. With that, go to the most direct source to apply to the company. You can use all kinds of Indeeds and LinkedIn's to look for the job opportunity, But the closer you can get to how the company wants to have applicants apply, the higher up the pile you're going to rank. We have certain services, and LinkedIn has been kind of bringing in some really great candidates, but a lot of these other job sites where people apply, it's not in the format that we wanted. They're not answering all the right questions the same way. It's just a lower quality submission. And so people who go straight through our website, they get the top billing because it's exactly what we asked for, right? It takes more, and we know it takes more effort to do it. If you can just sit there and just, auto apply to a bunch of places, well, how much do you actually know about us, or do you care about this thing? Whereas if you come to our website, that's a much more curated experience. Second is probably like LinkedIn level stuff, just because LinkedIn knows so much about people's work experience. And then finally, it's like the other stuff that, like, is there value? Yes, but it's a very different experience. It looks like we have a question. Go ahead and
Yeah,
unmute. You can
Bridget.
ask, or you can drop it in chat, Bridget. Do it.
No, sorry, that was totally accidental. I'm
Got it.
typing over here. I was going to make a comment, but I have my hand raising key bound to the thing that I was smacking accidentally when I was moving arrows. What I was
Got
going
it.
to say, though, in response, that was just what was I going to say? Totally distracted now. Oh, that making the effort to actually go to the website and apply directly through systems that you've clearly set up for that purpose, as opposed to, like you were just saying, auto completing through a third party application process or whatever, is just another way of demonstrating intentionality.
Yeah, we actually have a question in our applications that we request a video. I want like a video like this, right? So we have a tool that we love that you can just do a quick screen recording, um, and you don't get that through the average auto complete thing, and that's a requirement for us. It's like, if we don't have that, well, we have 200 applicants who sent us a video of themselves, and we have a bunch that didn't. Who do you think is going to rise to the top of the pile, right? So there's a lot there hidden within that um, direct application that I would encourage you to, it's worth the extra work. And if nothing else, at least for the 20% that you're going to go deep on. All right, lesson number 6, optimize the organization. Every company is different, and your skills and experience align differently with those companies. So here are some key differences of how these companies can be different. The first is the type of business. Next is the size of the company. And then there is the career path. So here are some types of businesses. In tech, most people instinctively rush to the product companies, the Facebooks, the Airbnbs, the Dropboxes. All of these are tech products. They sell technology. There's a whole category of businesses that are service businesses, so dev shops and agencies. It's a different kind of work experience you'll get, but they build technology for other people, and there's all kinds of jobs available. Um, if I had to pick early on, and I've seen this happen across many, many people coming out of code schools, News Story looks like a product company. The agency that I had ran for 10 years was a service company. Software engineers, early stage professionals in a service company. So our team members would touch 8 to 12 projects a year. A lot of experience in a very condensed amount of time. We have team members at News Story, more of a product company, who've only ever supported one piece of software, right? Now they're getting experience on that piece of tech, but it's very different, right? They're not having to context switch in and out of different pieces of software. And so the amount of new items you can add to your portfolio in a service shop is usually much greater than working at a product company. And there's a great resource, I believe it's called Clutch. So clutch.co, I think this is the URL. It is a directory of agencies. And you can go through, you can sort by geography, you cannot, all of them probably have career pages. And so there are tons of service-based businesses, a lot of opportunity. You're going to be able to cut your teeth on a lot of stuff. And then finally is support. So people who use technology, but they're just like tech-enabled doing something else. My first job in tech ever was actually at a coffee shop, a coffee company, a roastery. So we had a warehouse. And so the first thing I touched was the website. And then we built an e-commerce store. And then I did inventory management. A ton of technology was behind the scenes, and they sold coffee. I can guarantee that they were not on the traditional tech job boards. And for many of you, you're probably connected to businesses like this that could benefit from somebody with your skills and experience, but they don't know how to go find people like you. Even when I left the coffee company, they couldn't even, they weren't able to replace me with somebody else because they're like, I don't even know people like him, right? It was kind of a fluke that I came to work there. And then they wound up just hiring an agency afterward because I did so many different things that they're like, we would need to either hire 3 people or go to this. But I grew into that. I was able to, once I got my foot in the door, do a bunch of other stuff within this, where technology was a support function of the total business. So this is the coffee company I worked at. It was great, a lot of experience, but they're a support business. The agency I mentioned, so Polar Notion, we worked with a ton of other companies. This was maybe the largest season of my life where my network grew astronomically, because I was constantly meeting businesses, meeting other people. We're collaborating with other teams, all kinds of things. Agency for early stage software engineers and technologists and designers is great. And then finally, News Story. This is our old brand, but we are pioneering solutions to end global homelessness. So a lot of our tools have been there for a while now and are being maintained by technologists. So a lot of experience around there. The size of the business, I've definitely felt this personally over the years. One is News Story has grown, and then also working with founders. If you're thinking, I need to make the absolute most money I can, well, corporations tend to pay very well. If you need to get a job within a month, you're probably not going to go through a corporate hiring process in a month. Startups, by contrast, I have friends who don't make a ton of money at startups compared to what they could make at a corporation, but the work is super flexible, and their hiring process was like 3 days, right? Very quick, because startups are moving very fast. And then there's all kinds of stuff in the middle. But keep in mind that you may have expectations that don't fully align with the types of businesses you're applying to. So it's important to look at, hey, what kind of companies am I applying to, and how do my expectations align with what they can historically provide? Last is really like 3 career paths. Most people come out of a boot camp and try to become individual contributors somewhere, writing code or designing things. But many of you, actually, let's do a quick poll. How many of you have managed people before? You've managed, maybe 1, 2, more than 5 people? Keep your hand up if it's more than 5 people. Yeah, some of you have managed more than 5 people. So one of the biggest gaps in technology isn't just people writing code, it's people to manage the people who are writing code, right? Software engineers are a pretty unique bunch. Technologists are kind of quirky. And so people management is very valuable. You have experience there that while your technology skills might be lower, you may have a higher than average ability and experience managing people, and you could lean into that. You may be able to get a job as a something manager that pays the same or more than an entry level position, simply based on your last experience. And you're thinking, well, yeah, Morgan, but you don't understand. I worked at a chicken factory and I managed people who did blah, blah, blah. Look, here's the deal. Here's what I know. People are unique, and the challenges that they create tend to be patterns that repeat themselves. Right? So it doesn't matter if we were at 5 people, 50 people, we're on our way to 100 people at News Story. And many of the challenges are very reminiscent of what they've always been when it comes to managing people, right? It's setting expectations, it's coaching, it's training. The context is different, but the underlying problems are the same. And so you can lean into that. Just don't be confused by the context being different. People management is one of the areas that actually is the most consistent across companies. Individual contributors will look very different from from industry to industry. Principles like strategy, business builders will look very different, but people management is a layer of opportunity that is perhaps the most transferable from industry to industry. And then last one is customer type. Consumer-facing businesses behave differently than B2B type companies, and then enterprise companies and governments behave different as well. And so your interview process will likely differ greatly depending on what those companies are. All right, lesson number 7, work LinkedIn. Many of you, if you're thinking LinkedIn is lame, you're not wrong. And it's where the action is when it comes to getting a job. There's just value in it. So I'm going to give some examples here. Top left is a graph of people looking at my LinkedIn profile. I don't know if these numbers are any good, but the reason I brought this graph up was because when the graph was going up, it's because I was posting content. When the graph starts going down, I wasn't. And it's pretty clear how big of an impact that can make, right? Consistently posting content, engaging with people, reacting, all of the stuff that happens, and then not doing that, right? Because what happens is when you engage, people naturally click through to your profile, and so that's what it represents here. Mix up the type of content. So this, a candidate actually dropped off a pop-up card. So they're like follow-up was like physical pop-up card of a thing. And I like filmed a video to send to one of our team members. And then I was like, wait a minute, why don't I just share this on COVID or on COVID? It was during COVID, which is why I filmed the video, not in person. And I just posted it on LinkedIn to like share with other people, right? The video is super simple. So repurposing some content that you might be messaging, or maybe you shared with something in a chat thread with somebody that's kind of insightful. Awesome. Put that on LinkedIn to repurpose that. And then finally, optimize your LinkedIn profile. I put the bottom left here as an example of what not to do. So that header image that I used means nothing to most people. That's kind of like my personal rally cry of go boldly forward. And for many of you, that means absolutely nothing. It tells you nothing about who I am or what I do. And so that is the wrong profile photo, or that is the wrong header image to use. Use something that is either more descriptive or more personalized, or like just clearer, articulates who you are more clearly. People do not pick the best thing, unfortunately. People pick the thing they understand the best. And your LinkedIn profile is an opportunity to help people understand who you are better. So the description is a great place to do that as well. We'll keep rolling here. Actually, let me pause. There's some questions piling up. Really know your next work in your net worth.
Yeah, also,
cool.
I really love to use Loom. I saw that you use Loom for your one of your video posts. Definitely one of my favorites.
Big fan of Loom. I think even on your personal portfolio, and so I have a whole nother talk about building a compelling portfolio, you doing screen recordings, talking through your technology that you created, one is really awesome because if you give somebody a demo link, they might find something that's broken. Whereas if I get to create the video and walk you through it, it's a guided tour that I can kind of dodge the little things that I know that aren't working. And you get to like hear me explain things, articulate, and all of that. So Loom is super powerful, especially as you're building out your portfolio. And plus, you're able to, you could have read 100 of my posts or articles or whatever, but interacting with me in this fashion, you kind of see like, oh, this guy's like a caricature of a person, or he's got some personality or whatever, which is helpful, right? Helps build that relationship. I'm not for everybody, but for the people I am, I guess it's helpful. All right. So these are some artifacts from my portfolio. You'll notice one thing, which is consistency. I try to use the same profile photo. And that's because as employers are navigating all of your resume, your LinkedIn, your GitHub, whatever, if they're looking at dozens or hundreds of applicants, it's really hard to keep them all straight. It's so hard. And so if applicants use consistency across each, so your photo, your name, your description, right, those are all things that as they're moving around, they're like, it's like building a case for you in their minds. Whereas if all the pictures are different and they kind of can't tell, is that even you, or is that you doing a keg stand? I don't understand, right? Simple, clear, consistent photos is a way of helping build a better picture in the hiring manager's mind. Lesson number 9, play to your strengths. There's a great, I think it's called Clifton Strengths, but a great personality test that talks about how it is better to double down on what you're really good at than to try and become well-rounded. I think one of the mistakes that our education system makes is that we try to make well-rounded children. But the truth is the best professionals have superpowers, right? They're not actually well-rounded at all. They're people who, when you need something done a certain way, they're like, this is the absolute best for this, right? Specialists are the people we go to when our backs are against the wall or things aren't clear. The people who can demand a premium when it comes to income are people who are really, really good at something, not people who are the most well-rounded version of something. My daughter actually had surgery 2 years ago, had a kidney removed. And I remember thinking, who is the leading professional who does kidney removals for 3-year-olds? That's who I want. I don't want the person who is good at doing nasal procedures and amputations and no. I don't want a well-rounded doctor. I want the specialist. And I think as there are certain things about you that are very unique, predispositions that you have, I would encourage you to lean into those, turn up the volume, And rather than trying to present yourself as the most well-rounded person, present yourself as a clear picture of as a tool that could solve a specific problem within their company. I think it's very powerful. Here's for me. So here's an example. I use pictures to do this sometimes. Right? Pictures are a great way. They're worth 1,000 words. And so the way I describe it is a Venn diagram. My sweet spot is at the intersection of business, technology, and social impact. I put a little picture and I color in the middle, and I'm like, I want to live there. Now, why does this picture matter? Well, because some companies who are dumping oil into rainforests, they kind of know that this isn't our guy. But for companies that want to have a positive impact in the world and want an experienced technologist with business experience, new story, right? That opportunity came about because I had clarity on these 3 things. And I could raise my hand and say, I'm not for everybody, but for people who look like this, I'm your person. In your case, maybe it's education, or maybe there's some other past experience that fits into, and your hope would be that you could leverage that past experience. I'm using education just because I know a lot of teachers will often, make a career path in technology. Well, great. If you care about educating people, then don't shy away from your past education experience. Put that as one of your circles, right? Education matters. Education technology is super hot. Are you actually in the world of education people who do technology? You would outperform probably even me, right? You have a bent there that's super helpful. So figure out for yourself what your context is. I personally would encourage you to put it in a Venn diagram. Maybe you have 2 circles, maybe you have 4, whatever. I would encourage you to make sure that it's clear and accurate, right? Don't just like throw a bunch of circles together, but like look at your background and figure that out. But that helps people understand, many people I know would say like, I don't want to put somebody in a box. Well, again, we don't pick the best thing. We pick the thing we understand the best. And usually we understand things in boxes pretty well. Hello, Amazon. All right. Lesson number 10, ignore the rules. In life, there are laws and there are rules. If you break laws, you go to jail and you get really big fines. But if you break rules, usually there are opportunities to be rewarded. And so I'm not saying go do something that violates your personal code of conduct. What I'm saying is there are things through the interview process that are unwritten social norms that people just kind of do. And then there are things you can do outside of that that make an impression. I mentioned this person who sent TIFF streets, or the person who wrote handwritten cards. And if you were one of the other applicants who knew that they did that, you would think, oh my gosh, that's not fair. I didn't know you're supposed to do that. I didn't know I could do that. Who said you couldn't? Right? Thinking about ways that you can differentiate yourself. Yes, in the moment, I'm watching them from this end. We narrowed 300 applicants down to 50, down to 20. We've got 5 applicants left, and one of them gives cookies. I don't know how they knew I loved cookies, but they went for it. Well, it's really hard not to remember that person, right? Now, cookies is one example. We don't hire people because they give us cookies for sure, but it's one data point that helps somebody stand out, right? And if they're also the person who followed up individually, who had really thoughtful questions, right? All these different things, it really makes a difference. I have a bonus lesson for you here, and that is always counter the offer. If you find yourself at the point in the interview where they give you a job offer, counter. It doesn't matter how much it is or the difference. If you're like, I don't know, I'm so nervous, I've never seen any company rescind an offer simply because the candidate countered. So this is you have the most leverage you'll have at the point of an offer. And you could lock in a higher amount that you will make every single month for as long as you're there. And usually your next job is some percentage more than your last job, which means this benefit compounds. And the worst they could say is, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. But most people will typically try and meet you in the middle. So what I would say is when you get your offer, whenever that is, add 10 to 20%. You should feel a little nervous putting the number out there, right? And then send it to them. They're probably not going to give you what you wanted, but they might meet you in the middle, which is amazing because that's more than you would have gotten. And the worst thing they'll probably do is say no.
That is very true.
That absolutely compounds. All right, I've hit you with the fire hose, and we're up against time. I've said a lot. The goal here is not to be perfect and to do it all. If you did 4 of these things, you would be ahead of 90% of our applicants. Most people don't do even 2 of these. Right? So it's pretty easy to do these things and really stand out, because most of the examples I have are people who've made a pretty big impression this way. The goal is excellence, not perfection. So find one that you can start, and then look for other ways that you could add delight and surprise into the interview process. I chose all of these things because it's accessible to all of us. There's nothing magic about what I shared. It can be, you may apply them differently, but it has nothing to do with how good you are in your class. You could be the top of the class or the bottom of the class, and it doesn't matter. These things will give you an advantage. If you found any of this interesting, I have a free copy of a book that I wrote with a friend and a fellow code school curriculum creator from back in the day. He was actually a part of one of the first code schools. They're the originators of a 12-week boot camp. And he and I co-wrote a book for overcoming imposter syndrome, kickstarting your tech career. I have a free copy for you. I'll give you a link in just a second. All you have to do is cover shipping. And the last thing is, I would love your feedback. I give a lot of these talks, and my hope is that more people transition into tech. I think boot camps and code schools have the key to closing the labor gap in technology, but we have to make it more accessible for people.